Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. By the time the first wail cut through the silence of Black Widow's Rest, the thing dangling from the ceiling had already fed. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't a horror movie shriek that would wake the neighbors. It was a muffled, strangled gasp, smothered by the black, vine-like tongue sliding between the victim's lips. In the gloom of a cheap apartment bedroom, a shape hung upside down, her body folding unnaturally like a broken spider, the creak of ceiling beams the only sign of her weight. The tongue didn't move like a tongue should. It slithered, it pulsed, it stretched, glistening in the thin shaft of moonlight that cut through blinds, disappearing down the sleeper's throat. The man's chest hitched, his limbs twitching beneath his blanket, a faint, wet sound. Shluk, shluk, shluk. She fed quietly, her face tilted in the dark, strands of matted black hair swinging below her. Her eyes, clouded gray and too wide, never blinked. Her jaw unhinged slightly, a thin crack like old wood splitting. The ceiling groaned. She paused, listened, then slowly she withdrew the black vine from his throat, a glistening trail of saliva connecting them for a heartbeat before snapping. The man exhaled sharply, chest rising as though waking from a nightmare. But he didn't wake. Her tongue recoiled up, folding into her mouth like a rope being pulled in. The thing's silhouette rippled, as if she wasn't fully there, like the air was struggling to hold her shape. And then she was gone. Not gone like she crawled away, gone like she'd never been there at all. The man slept on. A faint cough rattled his chest, a cough that would sound like nothing at first, like a cold, like nothing to worry about. But deep inside, under his ribs, something shifted. Morning came gray and heavy over the town of Black Widow's Rest. The streets were slick with last night's mist, puddles stretching across potholes, and the clouds sagged low enough to smother the treetops. The kind of October morning that looked drained of color, like someone turned the saturation knob all the way down. Elena Vale didn't mind. She'd been waiting for this. Standing in the tiny kitchen of her equally tiny apartment, she shoveled burnt toast into her mouth with one hand while fumbling for her keys with the other. Her suitcase, still half unpacked, sat in the corner like an accusation. Her first reporting job, her first real start, her first day at the Black Widow's Rest Gazette. She grinned despite the stormy gray outside. A gloomy town for a gloomy girl, she muttered under her breath, glancing at her reflection in the darkened microwave door. Perfect. Elena was 35, sarcastic by nature, sharp-eyed, and prone to laughing at things she probably shouldn't. The kind of person who made jokes at funerals just to cut the tension. She tugged her coat tighter against the morning chill, stepping outside and locking her apartment door. The wind smelled like wet leaves and rusted metal. Something about this place already felt strange. The streets were too quiet. She'd driven into Black Widow's Rest 2 nights ago, and even then she'd noticed the way locals stared, like they were waiting for something, like they were holding their breath. Now, trudging down the street toward the Gazette building, she caught sight of them again. A man sweeping his porch froze mid-motion to watch her walk by. A woman carrying groceries crossed the street without looking up, her scarf hiding the lower half of her face. Everyone looked pale, everyone looked tired, but Elena shook it off. Small towns were always weird. That was half the fun. The Gazette office was cramped, old, and smelled faintly of dust and printer ink. 2 desks sat beside hers, and behind them were her new co-workers. Amy was the first to notice her, a woman with sharp cheekbones, black eyeliner smudged like she'd been up too late, and a mug that read, "Not a morning person," in chipped lettering. "You must be the newbie," Amy said, voice dry as the burnt toast Elena had abandoned. Before Elena could reply, the man at the next desk looked up from his computer screen. Ray, his badge said, tall, messy-haired, with that half-smile of someone who found most things mildly ridiculous. "Elena Vale, right?" he asked. "Congrats, you just got hired at the most boring newspaper in America." Elena smirked. "Dream come true." They exchanged the kind of glances that said, "Okay, we're going to get along." By lunch, the three of them were leaning over their cluttered desks, trading sarcastic quips about their boss's collection of troll dolls and the ancient coffee machine that groaned louder than a dying animal. After work, they wandered to the only cafe in town, a crooked little shop called the Widow's Brew. The sign over the door swung in the wind, the paint faded, the lettering nearly illegible. Inside it was warm, cluttered, and smelled like cinnamon and old wood. It was there, over steaming mugs of coffee and chipped plates of pie, that Elena first heard the name. Amy leaned back, sipping her drink. "So, has anyone told you about the town's claim to fame yet?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "Please don't say it's the pie." Ray smirked, leaning in. "No, the widow's tongue." The words seemed to drop the temperature of the room. Elena laughed. "The what?" Amy's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "The town's very own urban legend. It, Ray corrected. She, Amy insisted, is supposed to be this half-woman, half-spider thing that hangs from ceilings. Her tongue. Gross detail incoming, Ray warned. Is an endless black vine that creeps into your room when you're sleeping, Amy said matter-of-factly. And if you dream about her, you've already seen her. You just don't remember. Elena smirked. Nice bedtime story. Amy set her mug down a little too hard. It's not a story. People have gotten sick. Elena leaned back in her chair, feigning casualness. Sick? Ray shrugged. Colds, coughing, stomach bugs. People wake up feeling like crap. Some never wake up at all. Outside, the wind howled down the empty street, rattling the cafe windows. Elena laughed again, but softer this time, because even though she didn't believe in monsters, the way Amy's voice dropped and the way Ray's smile faltered made her skin crawl. Somewhere in the quiet corners of Black Widow's Rest, a cough rattled the night. And on the ceiling of some forgotten room, a black tongue uncoiled. The rain started after sunset, thin and cold, slanting against the narrow windows of Elena's apartment like impatient fingers tapping glass. She sat at her kitchen table, a chipped mug of tea cradled between her hands, laptop open, tabs multiplying like weeds. Headlines glared back at her. Local woman claims widow's tongue, visited her in sleep. Black Widow's Rest, urban legend. Hoax or haunting. Widow's Manor tours resumed despite safety concerns. She scrolled, the cursor blinking like it was impatient too. She told herself she wasn't spooked, that this was just curiosity, research for work. But the way Amy's voice had dropped earlier, the way Ray's smirk had faltered, that had dug into her like splinters. She took a sip of tea, grimacing at the bitterness. Tap. The sound was so faint she almost missed it. Tap, tap. Her head tilted, eyes flicking to the ceiling. The old building creaked. It always creaked, but this sound felt deliberate. 2 taps, a pause, 2 more. Elena laughed under her breath, too loud, too sharp. Relax, just old pipes and rain. She turned the volume up on her laptop, scrolling further. Another headline, Widow's Tongue, Sightings, Spike Near Manor. The image below it was black and white, grainy, just an empty hallway, the angle tilted, like someone dropped the camera. There was nothing in the picture, nothing you could point to, but the more she stared, the more wrong it felt, like something had been there and had moved. By the time she crawled into bed, the rain had turned heavy. Wind shoved at the windows. Branches scraped against the siding like nails on a chalkboard. She turned on her lamp and left it on, telling herself she just didn't feel like darkness tonight. Her ceiling stared back, flat, harmless, off-white paint. Still, her eyes kept darting up. Across town, in a narrow second-floor walk-up, Amy sat cross-legged on her couch, a bowl of soup untouched on the coffee table. The TV was on, volume low, some mindless sitcom flickering. But her eyes weren't on it. She was staring at the wall. Her hand reached absent-mindedly to her throat, scratching at an itch that wasn't really there. She coughed once, twice. Her lips curled into a half-smile, like she was embarrassed at herself. But the cough didn't stop. At the Gazette the next morning, the building smelled like wet coats and burned coffee. Ray looked up from his desk, dark circles under his eyes. "You didn't sleep either, huh?" he muttered. Elena raised an eyebrow. What gave it away? The 3 gallons of caffeine I'm pouring into my body, or the fact I look like I crawled out of a grave? Ray smirked, but it didn't last. Behind them, someone coughed, a harsh rasping sound that echoed in the cramped office. Elena turned her head. A man she hadn't met yet, one of the layout guys, hunched over his keyboard, his knuckles white as he gripped the desk. He waved her off when she looked, muttering, "Just a cold." Another cough shook him, deeper this time. The sound clung to the air even after it stopped. After work, the 3 of them returned to the Widow's Brew because there was nowhere else to go. Outside, the sky had the same heavy gray weight as yesterday and the day before that. Inside, Amy stirred her coffee absently, staring into the swirl of cream. "Tell me more about her," Elena said suddenly. Amy blinked. "Who?" "The Widow's Tongue." Amy's hand stilled, spoon clinking softly against the cup. Ray snorted. "You don't actually believe this crap, do you?" Elena smirked. "No, but it's either listen to you guys explain it or write about pothole repairs for the rest of my life." Amy leaned forward, voice lowering. "They say she was a widow before she was, whatever she is now. Lived in that big manor on the edge of town. Lost her husband in the war. Then she started messing with things she shouldn't. Dark books, old rites. They say she wanted him back so badly, she changed." Ray rolled his eyes. Or, she was just a lonely woman who got turned into a ghost story by bored townsfolk. "No," Amy said sharply, her voice cutting through the clatter of the cafe. "She's real." The air in the room seemed to drop just like yesterday. Elena laughed, but softer this time. "So what, she just shows up and what, eats you?" "Not eats you," Amy whispered. "She plants things in you." The silence after that was louder than any scream. That night back in her apartment, Elena lay awake. Rain tapped against the glass again. Her lamp was still on. The ceiling stared back, and somewhere, maybe in the wall, maybe above it, something tapped back. Tap, tap. By morning, the rain hadn't stopped. It hadn't even slowed. Black Widow's Rest felt drowned, smothered under an endless October downpour. Mist curled off the streets like the town itself was exhaling something rotten. Elena sat in her car outside the Gazette building, windshield wipers struggling, coffee cooling in the cup holder. She couldn't get the tapping from last night out of her head. 2 sharp taps, a pause. 2 more, like something was knocking from above. She shook it off, shoved the car door open, and ran for the building, coat plastered to her skin by the time she slammed through the front door. The Gazette felt wrong that morning. Not just old building wrong, not just weird small town wrong. Off. The air smelled damp, metallic. Someone had left the radio on low in the corner, but instead of music, there was static. Just a faint hiss that buzzed under every cough, every creak. Cough. It came from the back room. Another one followed, harsher this time, wet enough to make Elena's stomach tighten. She turned. A man she hadn't noticed before, mid-50s, Gazette badge that read Martin, stood hunched over a copy machine, his hand pressed to his mouth, coughing into his sleeve, his shoulders shaking with each spasm. "You okay?" Elena asked cautiously. Martin waved her off without looking. Just a cold. But when he pulled his sleeve away, she caught it, a faint smear of black, ink maybe. Or not. Ray and Amy were already at their desks, both looking like they hadn't slept. Ray was pale, eyes bloodshot, his hair a mess like he'd run his hands through it too many times. "Rough night?" Elena said, dropping her bag onto her desk. Ray managed half a smile. "Didn't sleep, kept thinking I heard stuff." Amy's laugh was humorless. "I heard it too." Elena frowned. "Heard what?" They didn't answer right away, just looked at each other. Then Amy whispered, "Tapping." Elena froze. The rest of the day dragged. The phones rang twice as much as usual. Calls about missing pets, vandalized fences, weird noises in the night. The rain never let up, and the coughing got worse. By evening, the Gazette felt more like a sick ward than a newsroom. Martin's cough turned ragged, like his lungs were tearing themselves apart. 2 other staffers had gone home early, muttering about fever and cramps. Ray watched them leave, his jaw tight. Half this place is coughing up a lung. "Must be something going around," Amy muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Elena stared at the empty desks, an itch crawling across the back of her neck. They ended up at the Widow's Brew again that night because they didn't know where else to go. The cafe felt different. It was quieter, fewer people. The barista wore a scarf pulled high over her mouth, eyes shadowed with fatigue. When she turned to pour coffee, she coughed into her shoulder, a harsh, tearing cough. Elena's hand tightened around her mug. "Okay," she said, voice low. "What's going on in this town?" Amy stared into her cup. "Flu?" Ray shook his head. "Doesn't feel like flu." "Feels like something else," Elena muttered, barely audible. Outside, the rain hammered against the window. That night, back in her apartment, the unease followed her. The tapping started earlier this time, before midnight. 2 taps, pause, 2 more. She turned the TV up. It didn't help. The sound came again, softer now, almost teasing. She stared at the ceiling until her eyes blurred, waiting for something, anything, to move. And for one split second, she thought she saw it. A thin black shape curling along the plaster like smoke. Gone when she blinked. Across town, in a cramped, peeling yellow house, Martin woke up choking. He stumbled from bed, coughing so hard he thought he'd break a rib. Something slid out of his mouth, thick and black like a string of wet hair, before snapping back down his throat as if it had a mind of its own. The scream never left his lungs. The night came too quickly. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, and by now it felt like the entire town was rotting under it. Elena sat on her couch, laptop open, but she hadn't read a single sentence of the article she was supposed to be writing. She couldn't stop staring at the ceiling. The tapping hadn't started yet, but she could feel it coming. Like the pause before a held breath, the silence was louder than any noise. By midnight, the tea she made had gone cold. The TV droned in the background, some old sitcom laugh track cutting into the quiet like a broken clock. She turned it off. Now there was nothing but the storm and the stillness above her. At 1:12 a.m., she woke with a start. Her lamp was still on, but the room looked darker somehow. She didn't remember falling asleep. Her neck prickled. Slowly, she rolled her eyes upward. It was there. Hanging from the ceiling, limbs bent the wrong way, body folded like a spider clinging to its web. For one heartbeat, her brain refused to process what she was seeing. The woman's face, or what used to be a woman's face, was pale and stretched, cheekbones too sharp, skin sagging like wax melting on bone. Her eyes were the worst part, gray, empty, huge, watching her like prey. Her mouth opened, and the tongue slid out. It wasn't a tongue. It was an endless black vine, glistening and pulsing, stretching down from her mouth like something alive on its own. It snaked toward Elena's face, slow, deliberate, tasting the air. A drop of saliva fell from it, landing on Elena's cheek. She didn't breathe, didn't blink. Couldn't. The tongue brushed her lips. Cold. Wet. Her lungs convulsed, an instinctive inhale, and the thing pushed forward. Elena snapped. She didn't think. She kicked. Her foot slammed into her lamp, knocking it over, shattering it against the floor. The bulb exploded, light flashing like lightning, and Widow's tongue jerked back. A sound came out of her mouth. Not a scream, not a hiss, but something in between. The ceiling groaned under her weight as she skittered backward, folding into herself. And then, gone. Elena didn't stop to think. She grabbed her keys off the nightstand and bolted, barefoot, heart in her throat. The hallway outside her apartment smelled like damp wood and dust. Every light flickered. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she ran for the stairwell, the sound of her feet slapping on the tile too loud, like it would call the thing back. She hit the front door and shoved it open, cold rain hitting her face like slaps. Her car was halfway down the block, but she didn't look behind her. She didn't dare. She unlocked the door with shaking hands, slid in, slammed it shut, and jammed the key into the ignition. For one horrifying second, it didn't turn. Then, she floored it. The streets of Black Widow's Rest blurred by in sheets of rain and neon reflections. She didn't think, didn't breathe. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly missed the turn onto Ray's street. By the time she reached his house, she was sobbing, her breath fogging the windshield. She didn't even park, just skidded to a stop, jumped out, and pounded on his door. Ray answered in boxers and a t-shirt, hair sticking up, eyes bleary. Jesus, Elena. She's real, Elena gasped, voice cracking. Ray blinked. What? Elena grabbed his shirt front, fingers digging in. She's real. She was in my apartment, on my ceiling. Her words broke. Ray stared at her like she might be losing it. Then he saw her face, the pale terror in it, and his own expression shifted. Behind him, the hallway light flickered. Somewhere outside, through the storm, a faint tap echoed. Tap, tap. By the next morning, the storm hadn't let up. It wasn't rain anymore. It was relentless, like the sky was wringing itself dry. The whole town looked drowned, water pooling in potholes, gutter drains coughing sludge. Elena sat at Ray's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. The warmth didn't reach her fingers. Her clothes were still damp from the night before, hair clinging to her neck. She hadn't said much since arriving at his door, breathless and terrified. Ray kept glancing at her from across the table like he wanted to ask if she'd imagined it, but didn't dare. By noon, they made their way back to the Gazette. The office smelled wrong. Not just like coffee and paper and dust, like mildew, like damp wood that had been rotting for years. A sound cut through the room the moment they walked in. Coughing, deep, chest-tearing coughing. Martin, the older man from layout, was hunched over his desk, hacking so hard he sounded like he'd snap in half. He didn't notice them at first. His hand was clamped over his mouth, knuckles white. When he finally pulled it away, Elena's stomach flipped. His palm was streaked with something thick and black. Not ink. Not ink. Amy was already at her desk, pale as the paper stacked around her. Jesus, she muttered under her breath. Half the office called out sick. Ray tried to joke. Guess the widow's tongue doesn't do HR paperwork. But his voice wavered at the end, because there was no humor in this room, only the coughing. By 3 o'clock, 2 more staffers went home. By 5, a woman in classifieds collapsed in the hallway, hacking up thick black mucus before someone dragged her out. The infection was spreading. They didn't have to say it out loud. They all felt it. Something had broken loose in Black Widow's Rest, and it was too late to stop it. That evening, they ended up back at the Widow's Brew. But the cafe didn't feel safe anymore. It was nearly empty, just a handful of patrons hunched over tables. Everyone looked pale. One man coughed into his napkin, folded it carefully, and slid it aside like he didn't want anyone to see what came out. The barista wore gloves now, and a scarf pulled over her mouth. Her eyes were bloodshot. Ray stirred his coffee without drinking it. Amy picked at the label of her cup. Elena stared out the rain-streaked window, pulse hammering. "Do you think it's her?" she whispered finally. Ray didn't answer. Amy did. "Yes," the word landed like a hammer. That night, the town fell quiet. Too quiet. No cars, no footsteps, just rain. In a small yellow house on Birch Lane, Martin lay on the bathroom floor. His eyes were bloodshot, his face wet with sweat, his body convulsing. Something moved under his skin, just for a second, a ripple beneath his ribs, like something alive. He coughed again. And this time, he didn't stop. Back in her apartment, Elena couldn't bring herself to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. The gray face, the tongue stretching toward her. She kept every light on, but the ceiling still stared back, and somewhere in the walls a faint scritch echoed. Across town, a man woke up coughing, and this time when he opened his mouth, something tiny crawled out. By the next morning, the coughing wasn't just in the Gazette. It was everywhere. Outside Elena's apartment window, the streets of Black Widow's Rest were quieter than ever. Cars sat abandoned along the curbs, curtains were drawn. The only sounds were rain, wind, and that raw, tearing cough that seemed to echo from every direction. Some were muffled behind walls, others were out in the open, sharp and violent. A woman doubled over near the bus stop, hacking into her hands. When she pulled them away, something black and glistening stretched between her fingers before snapping back into her mouth like it was alive. Elena turned away before she could gag. By noon, she, Ray, and Amy met in the Gazette parking lot. None of them had the stomach for another day in the office. "We can't just sit here," Amy said, her voice tight, breath fogging the air. "Agreed," Elena muttered. "We need answers. Something. Anything." Ray crossed his arms. "There's one place to start." All 3 of them thought the same thing at the same time. Widow's Manor. The manor sat on the edge of town, past an iron gate that looked like it hadn't been oiled since the 1940s. It loomed against the gray sky, 3 stories of rotting Victorian wood and crooked windows. The rain streaked down its walls like tears. A broken sign swung on rusted chains. Widow's Manor, historic tour, closed for the season. But the gate wasn't locked. Inside, the air was thick, not just dusty, thick, like breathing through wet wool. The entryway smelled like mold and something faintly sweet, like spoiled fruit. The wooden floorboards groaned under their weight, each step sounding like a scream being held back. "Why does this place feel like it's waiting?" Elena muttered. No one answered. The walls were lined with faded portraits. The woman's face appeared again and again, first in oil paintings, then in black and white photographs. Her eyes followed them. They were too wide. They reached the parlor, and all 3 of them stopped. In the middle of the room was a nest. It wasn't twigs or straw. It was made of hair. Long black strands twisted into ropes, tangled around bits of bone and broken furniture. In the center of it, something twitched. Ray swallowed. "Is that?" The twitch became a shiver. The shiver became a jerk. Something hatched. It was small, no bigger than a rat, but it didn't move like one. Its body was slick, its legs too long, its mouth opening in a silent scream as it scuttled out of the nest. Elena slapped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Amy whispered, "Oh my God." More movement, more hatchlings, dozens of them. It scraped across the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards beneath their feet, the sound of something huge moving above them. Ray's voice was barely a whisper. "She's here." A shadow moved across the ceiling, slow, deliberate, long limbs, hair dragging. The tongue dropped first. It whipped down like a striking snake, lashing toward Amy's face. She screamed, jerking backward, but it wrapped around her arm instead, tightening with impossible strength. Amy's scream turned to a choked sob as the tongue pulled. Ray grabbed the nearest thing he could find, an iron fireplace poker, and swung hard. The metal connected with the tongue with a wet crack. The creature screamed, an ear-splitting shriek that rattled the windows, and the tongue recoiled, releasing Amy. She stumbled back, gasping, clutching her arm. Elena grabbed her, pulling her away just as the ceiling split open. Widow's tongue dropped down, not all of her, just enough. Her face, too pale, too long. Her body, half woman, half spider, arms bending at wrong angles as her claws scraped the floor. Her gray eyes locked on them, unblinking. The tongue lashed out again. Ray shouted, "Go!" They ran, through the parlor, down the hall, hatchlings scattering under their feet. The tongue snapped against the wall inches from Elena's face, leaving a wet streak on the wallpaper. She didn't look back. They slammed through the back door and into the rain, gasping for air. Ray slammed the door behind them, bracing it with his body, but the wood buckled like it was breathing. "Is she?" Elena started, but her voice cracked. Ray shook his head, breath ragged. "She's still in there." The manor loomed behind them, black and dripping in the rain. Something moved in one of the upstairs windows, just for a second. Gray eyes. Watching. The night they decided to go back to Widow's Manor, the rain had stopped. For the first time in days, the clouds broke, but the sky wasn't clear. It was a bruised, sickly color, the moon hanging behind it like a pale eye. Elena stood by Ray's car, coat pulled tight, fingers trembling around the gas can she'd stolen from the Gazette's maintenance shed. "Tell me again why this isn't the dumbest thing we've ever done," she muttered. Ray slung an old shotgun over his shoulder, the kind people in small towns keep in closets, just in case. "Because if we don't," he said flatly, "no one else will." Amy stood between them, pale but steady. one arm still bruised from the last time that tongue wrapped around her. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. They all knew. If they didn't burn Widow's tongue out of her nest tonight, the whole town was already lost. The manor waited for them. It looked different now, bigger, darker, like it had been holding its breath for this moment. The iron gate groaned open, and as they stepped through, Elena's stomach turned. There was no wind, no sound, even the insects were silent. Inside, the air felt thick again, thicker than last time, like the walls themselves were exhaling something sweet and rotten. Every portrait watched. The floor creaked like someone was moving ahead of them, always just out of sight. Ray held the shotgun tight. Amy clutched the iron poker. Elena gripped the gas can until her knuckles went white. They reached the parlor and froze. The nest was bigger. What had been a tangled heap of hair and bone was now a structure, sprawling across the room, almost touching the ceiling. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of cocoons hung from the rafters. Some twitched, some didn't. Elena's throat tightened. How many? Amy's voice cracked. Too many. The sound came then, not from the walls this time, from everywhere. The ceiling above them shuddered. A long, black tongue dropped into view, slick and dripping. Ray didn't hesitate. He fired. The shotgun blast ripped through the silence, the recoil jerking his arm. The tongue jerked back, shrieking, black ichor splattering the wall. But the scream that followed wasn't from the tongue, it was from her. Widow's tongue dropped down, all of her this time. She unfolded from the ceiling like a nightmare, limbs bending and cracking, her body contorting into a shape that wasn't fully human. Her face was worse up close, pale, sagging, gray eyes unblinking, her mouth opened wider than it should, jaw unhinging, and the tongue lashed. Elena dove. The tongue cracked against the floor where she'd been standing, leaving a wet smear. Ray fired again, but the shot only made her scream louder, her voice a piercing screech that rattled the windows. Amy swung the poker, metal smashing into the tongue mid-swipe. The creature jerked back, but only for a second. Then it came again, faster. "Elena, now!" Ray shouted. She didn't think. She threw the gas can. The liquid splashed across the nest, across the floor, across Widow's tongue herself. The smell hit instantly, sharp, chemical, choking. Ray fumbled in his pocket, pulled out the lighter. For a heartbeat, his thumb wouldn't spark it. Widow's tongue moved. The lighter flared. He dropped it. The room ignited. Fire raced up the nest, licking the walls, crawling across the floor. The cocoons burst, black smoke and chittering screams filling the air as hatchlings writhed in the flames. Widow's tongue screamed louder than anything human, high, shattering, a sound that scraped inside their skulls. Her limbs lashed, her tongue whipping wildly, cracking into the walls as the flames climbed higher. Elena grabbed Amy's arm. "Go!" she shouted, dragging her toward the hall. Ray fired one more shot before turning and running, the blast echoing through the burning manor. The house seemed to collapse around them as they ran. Fire roared, ceilings cracked, cocoons fell and burst, tiny black shapes writhing as flames devoured them. Widow's tongue's screech followed them down every hallway, every turn, until they burst through the front door and into the cold night. They collapsed in the wet grass, gasping, rain mixing with ash on their faces. Behind them the manor burned, orange flames licking at the sky, black smoke curling upward. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like they'd done it. Then, through the flames, a shape moved, a silhouette on the top floor, tall, bent, unbroken. The gray eyes reflected the firelight. Widow's tongue didn't burn. She only watched. They staggered back to the car, coughing, shaking, every muscle screaming. Elena glanced over her shoulder one last time. The manor burned, but those gray eyes were still there, watching from the window, unblinking. And somewhere in the darkness of Black Widow's Rest, the coughing hadn't stopped. The house would turn to ash, the nest would crumble, but the tongue would always find another ceiling,